In this episode, we focus on a practical warning that becomes more important the more helpful AI seems. The audit team can develop blind spots when it uses AI inside its own work. These blind spots are not usually dramatic or obvious, and that is what makes them dangerous. They show up as small habits, like trusting a summary too quickly, using an AI-generated draft without verifying the details, or sharing sensitive text in ways that feel convenient but are not well controlled. The three risks in the title, bias, leakage, and over-reliance, are a useful lens because they cover different failure modes that can quietly damage audit quality and credibility. Bias can skew what the audit notices and how it interprets risk. Leakage can expose sensitive audit information in ways that create harm and legal exposure. Over-reliance can weaken professional judgment and make audit conclusions less defensible. By the end, you should be able to explain these blind spots in plain language and describe how an audit team can prevent them while still benefiting from AI assistance. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Bias in AI-in-audit work means the AI output may reflect patterns that unfairly favor certain interpretations or certain groups, or it may mirror the biases present in the data it was trained on. For beginners, it helps to remember that AI systems learn from existing text and examples, and existing text often contains hidden assumptions. In an audit setting, bias can show up as repeated framing that downplays certain risks, emphasizes others, or uses language that subtly shifts blame toward people rather than toward processes. Bias can also appear in what the AI highlights as important, such as focusing on easily measured technical issues while missing human and governance issues that are less explicit in the data. If an AI assistant is used to categorize findings, it might consistently classify certain themes as low severity because it has seen similar language used casually in other contexts. That kind of bias can shape audit outcomes even if no one intends it. Preventing bias starts with treating AI outputs as suggestions that must be checked against professional standards, not as neutral truth. Another form of bias is selection bias, which happens when the audit team uses AI to decide what evidence to review, what transactions to sample, or what issues to prioritize. If the AI suggests looking at a certain set of records, and the team accepts that without challenge, the audit may miss areas of higher risk. For example, if the AI is guided by patterns that show up in common, well-documented processes, it may steer attention toward areas with more text and away from areas with fewer records, even if the less documented areas are where controls are weakest. Bias can also be introduced through prompts or questions the auditors ask, because how you ask can shape what the AI returns. If you ask in a way that assumes the controls are effective, you may get outputs that reinforce that assumption. Preventing this requires deliberate skepticism and a habit of asking alternative questions, such as what could be missing, what could be wrong, and what evidence would disprove the initial conclusion. An audit team that trains itself to challenge AI framing reduces the chance that biased suggestions become biased audit results. Leakage is the risk that sensitive audit information is exposed to people or systems that should not have it. Audit work routinely involves confidential details, including internal weaknesses, incident information, personal data, and security-sensitive architecture. Leakage can happen when auditors paste sensitive text into an AI system that stores or transmits it beyond the audit team's control. It can also happen when AI outputs accidentally include sensitive details that end up in reports, emails, or shared workspaces. Beginners sometimes imagine leakage as a hacker stealing data, but in many cases leakage is accidental, caused by convenience and unclear rules. For example, an auditor might include a long excerpt from a security incident record to get a better summary, without realizing that the excerpt contains identifiers that should not be shared. Leakage can also be subtle, like revealing internal control gaps in a draft that is shared too widely. Preventing leakage requires clear rules about what data can be used, strong controls over where that data goes, and careful review of outputs before they are shared. A related concept is data minimization, which means using the smallest amount of sensitive information needed to accomplish a task. If an auditor wants help drafting a paragraph, they rarely need to paste entire incident reports or full datasets. They might instead use a short, sanitized description or a high-level summary that strips out identifiers. This reduces leakage risk while still enabling productivity. Another leakage control is access control, meaning only authorized audit staff can see audit inputs and outputs, and drafts should not be stored in uncontrolled locations. Output review is also critical because AI can sometimes reproduce sensitive content it was given, even when the final report does not need it. If auditors do not review outputs carefully, sensitive details can slip into final deliverables or into communications with stakeholders who should not receive them. For beginners, the key lesson is that confidentiality is not automatically preserved by good intentions. It is preserved by disciplined handling practices that assume mistakes are possible and therefore build safeguards around the work. Overreliance is the risk that auditors trust AI too much and allow it to replace parts of the thinking process that auditors are supposed to own. This is one of the most common blind spots because AI outputs often sound confident and well-written, which can create the feeling that the job is done. Overreliance can lead to shallow verification, where auditors accept summaries instead of reviewing source evidence. It can also lead to weaker skepticism, where auditors stop challenging management explanations because the AI-generated narrative feels plausible. Another form is decision outsourcing, where the AI effectively selects the risk rating, the severity, or the conclusion, and the human simply agrees. In auditing, that is dangerous because conclusions must be defensible, and defensibility requires showing how evidence was evaluated under professional standards. If the auditor cannot explain why the conclusion is correct without saying the AI suggested it, credibility collapses. Preventing overreliance means building habits and controls that keep AI in an assistant role and keep judgment clearly human. A helpful way to understand overreliance is to compare it to using a calculator. A calculator can speed up arithmetic, but you still need to know whether the result makes sense and whether you typed the right numbers. In the same way, an AI assistant can speed up drafting or organizing, but the auditor still needs to confirm that the logic is correct and the facts are supported. Overreliance is most likely when auditors are rushed, tired, or overloaded, which is exactly when audits are also most likely to miss important issues. That is why preventing overreliance should not rely only on personal discipline. It should include process controls. For example, review procedures can require that key statements and findings be traced back to evidence, and that any AI-generated summaries be validated against source records. Quality checks can require a second reviewer to confirm that language is accurate and not overstated. These controls create a safety net that reduces the chance that a confident but wrong AI output becomes an official audit conclusion. Bias, leakage, and overreliance also interact, which can amplify harm. If an AI output is biased in a way that downplays certain risks, and the auditor over-relies on it, the audit may miss critical issues. If the auditor then shares AI-generated drafts widely without careful review, leakage can occur at the same time that the audit is becoming less accurate. In other words, the audit can become both less correct and less secure, which is a worst-case combination for credibility. This is why prevention needs to be comprehensive. You do not want one strong control, like restricting data, while leaving another area, like verification, weak. You also do not want to focus only on technical safeguards while ignoring human behavior, such as the tendency to accept well-written text as true. A mature audit approach treats these risks as a connected system and designs layered controls that address each link. Practical prevention begins with clear boundaries on acceptable AI use in audit. Some tasks, like drafting non-sensitive explanatory text or organizing public standards language for internal use, may be lower risk. Other tasks, like summarizing sensitive incident details, labeling root causes, or recommending final severity ratings, are higher risk and should require stricter controls and human review. Training helps auditors recognize where bias can appear, what leakage looks like, and how overreliance happens. Training also helps auditors learn how to phrase questions in a way that avoids leading assumptions and encourages critical thinking. Another prevention step is documentation of process, meaning the audit function defines how AI fits into the workflow and what verification steps are mandatory. This documentation supports consistent behavior across the team and supports defensibility when stakeholders ask how the audit was performed. When the rules are clear, it becomes easier to enforce them and easier to notice when shortcuts occur. Another powerful prevention technique is to design the workflow so that evidence review comes before writing. If auditors first examine source evidence and form an initial view, then use AI only to help draft clearer language, the risk of over-reliance decreases. If auditors do it the other way around, using AI to generate conclusions before deeply reviewing evidence, the risk increases sharply. The order matters because first impressions are hard to undo, and AI-generated narratives can anchor thinking in a way that reduces skepticism. Auditors can also use deliberate cross-checking, such as asking the AI to list possible counterarguments or alternative explanations, then verifying those possibilities with evidence. This turns the AI into a tool for expanding skepticism rather than reducing it. Bias is reduced because the workflow encourages multiple perspectives. Over-reliance is reduced because the output is treated as a brainstorming input, not a verdict. Finally, prevention includes the willingness to slow down when the stakes are high. Some audit areas involve major risk, sensitive data, or potential regulatory consequences, and those areas deserve extra caution. Using AI in those contexts can still be valuable, but only with stronger controls, stricter data handling, and heavier human review. The audit function can also track its own mistakes and near misses, such as cases where AI summaries were misleading or where draft outputs included sensitive details, then update procedures accordingly. This is the audit mindset applied to the audit process itself, continuous improvement based on evidence. For beginners, that is an important takeaway because it shows that governance is not a one-time policy. It is an ongoing discipline that adapts as new risks appear. AI can help auditors, but only if auditors also audit their use of AI. Preventing AI-in-audit blind spots means recognizing that bias, leakage, and over-reliance can quietly undermine audit quality, security, and credibility. Bias can skew what you notice and how you interpret evidence. Leakage can expose sensitive audit information beyond intended boundaries, and over-reliance can weaken professional judgment and make conclusions less defensible. The best prevention approach uses clear boundaries, strong data minimization, careful output review, and verification steps that tie conclusions back to source evidence. It also uses training and workflow design to keep skepticism alive and to treat AI as an assistant rather than an authority. When you approach these risks thoughtfully, you can gain the benefits of AI in audit without sacrificing the trust that makes auditing valuable in the first place. That balance, more than any specific tool choice, is what makes AI integration responsible and sustainable.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.